Hello, viewer, and welcome to Spotlight here on Hope TV, where you look and live. And on Spotlight, we are always doing our very best to bring to you persons who are coming in the direction of light. Now, one of the big things that's happening in the church environment and in the country right now are bloodlines between the church and politics. Now, this began a little out for it. I mean, things just went on and on and on. And now we're in a place that is really amorphous. We cannot tell the boundaries between the church and the politics, and we cannot tell who is leading who, whether it's a politician leading the priest, or there is the priest leading the politician, or they are taking turns like a relay. We can't tell. And so on Spot, engaging the subject of where do we draw the line between the priest and the politician. And this is an important discussion, and we are so glad to be joined by Reverend Dr. Kamau Thairo, who is a clergyman with the Presbyterian Church of East Africa, but also a scholar, and with great insights when it comes to matters church and the public life. Now, as always, you're part of this conversation. Do engage us on the WhatsApp line that's provided there, and also on our social media platforms. Let's talk about where do we draw the line. Dr. Thairo, welcome.
Thank you.
As you can tell, it's disturbing.
Yeah, usually you're darker, but by just that opening statement, you're even darker. To me, must have disturbed you.
Hoping that maybe by the end of this discussion, I'll have maybe brightened up a little bit.
Hopefully, hopefully.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Again to Spotlight.
Thank you.
And thank you for just being brave to handle this subject.
By the grace of God. It's not an easy one. The relationship between church, politics, priests, the politician, has always been, and I expect no less. I expect no less because them. I mean, it's interests, their benefits. So it's never an easy topic. But by the grace of God, we hope we can add value today.
Yeah, not easy, but very critical.
Yes,
it's a critical subject.
Yes, now, especially in our season.
Yeah.
And especially as a nation, I think we must now have that discussion.
Okay.
And we have to go one way or another. But hopefully, we can all go to God.
All right. Oh, yeah. Oh, thank you for taking us there. But let's begin here. We are talking a lot about a Christian nation.
Yeah.
We're talking a lot about, having Christian leaders, from the top, I mean, the top part of government is Christian. We take this Christian government for granted. What is meant by Christian government exactly? What does that mean?
Now, let me see it properly. You have started with the hot one.
Yeah, what is this Christian government?
But you see, we have to first define what is Christian. And we have to go back to the scripture. That people who had moved from Jerusalem in the book of Acts went to a city called Antioch. And the people have so certain kind of people doing things like Christ. And they said, by the way, these ones are doing this like Christ. And then the word Christian became. So to say Christian means you're doing like Christ. You're reflecting Christ in every way. Now, to say Kenya is a Christian nation, it therefore follows that we do things like Christ and we reflect. Even when we bribe the policeman.
I think then we should use a different description. If Christian means doing things like Christ.
And the things we are doing are not reflecting Christ. No wonder I think we are, because the Constitution defines our nation as secular, but Christians are religion. So, but credit be given, if we say we are a Christian nation, then it means we have to reflect Christ in our dealings, in the way we run the church, in the way we run the nation. But certainly you will agree with me, a lot it leaves a lot to be desired, the way we run the nation.
You know, the perspective you've sent here is very eye-opening, actually jaw-dropping.
Yes.
That to be a Christian nation means we're doing things as Christ did.
Yeah. As Christ
And also, from the context you've given, we don't call ourselves.
did. Yeah.
We are called by
True.
those outsiders who are looking at us.
They look at us and they're saying, whether these ones are doing like Christ. You don't have to give a big testimony and with flowery words. People just look at you and say, by the way, this one is a man of God.
So it is not a name that comes from a religious identity. It's a description that comes from witness.
Yes. But the Christian should come from witness, or it flows inwards, from inwards outwards. It is a manifestation of what you carry. So if what is in you is Christ, then what flows from the abundance of the heart, the actions reflect what is in the heart, the words reflect what is in the heart. So if we say we are a Christian nation, then it follows such things like corruption, even though not 100%, at least not to the levels. Because you see, corruption is not a legal problem, it's a moral. If it were a legal problem, there would be no corruption in Kenya because we have some of the best laws. But the fact that we still have corruption is an indication, a reminder that we haven't gotten to a level where we reflect Christ as Christ would want us to reflect Him. So Christianity has to do with the inside reflecting. I mean, the outside reflecting the inside.
Okay. Now, before we get very pessimistic, because that's a line we can really, we can really follow, given your initial description of what Christian should be. In our present state of government and leadership, or even the ongoing policies, can you single out one or two that you can say, in this area, there's a certain Christ-likeness? In this area, or in this person, there's a certain Christ-likeness. And be bold. If there are persons, just name them. If there are policies, just name them. If there are counties that are Christ-like, please name them.
That's a difficult one.
Okay.
Because as you see, our experiences inform what we say. And my experience right now, especially with the public expression of faith, the public expression of Christianity, leaves a lot to be desired. So I would say, for example, like the Thanksgiving events that were happening, one would be tempted to say, these were a true reflection of Christianity. These were a true reflection of faith. But you will bear me witness, out of the 4 hours that Thanksgiving service is held, only 1.5 hours is church service. The rest is politics. So I am hard pressed.
Wow.
I'm really hard pressed.
So the witness we're talking about then is hard to track.
It's very hard to track.
It's plain clothed.
Yes, yes. I mean, it's very hard to. And you see, one of the things that really pains me, and these ones we can't blame the politicians. It has to be us, the clergy. You see, where we are at in terms of Christianity in Kenya, the success of any Christian leader is not measured by discipleship, is not measured by the depth you take people during worship, is not measured by how you challenge people to ministry. The current Christianity, the success of any Christian leader, especially the ministers, the pastors, whatever title you are called, is measured by the structures you raise and the budgets you run. So that the bigger the budget, regardless of whether you draw people to God or reveal God to people, so long as you run a big budget, drive a big car, then you're very successful.
And it's relatable because sometimes you would find a pastor who has a small church, but has a lot of money. And everyone is like, wow, how do you do this?
How do you do that?
It's in fact, we say it's very impressive. Yeah.
And we even go there for benchmarking.
Yes.
We even go there for benchmarking. And eventually, that has led the church to be transformed from a spiritual home to a center of commerce. And because the church is now a center of commerce, whatever helps us meet that agenda, we are not afraid.
Let's stay with that.
Yes.
And allow me to go back. Because if we're talking about drawing the line in this season, we cannot draw the line without going back to the campaign season.
Yes.
And one of the interesting things is that the politician has become the main sponsor of the priest.
Yes.
And the sponsorship is in terms of money. Can you comment about that?
Yes. You see, tying the two together. You see, because I am measured by the money I raise and the infrastructure I raise, and it doesn't matter how I raise the money, whether I teach the wrong thing on the pulpit, wherever I get the money. So the politician, on one hand, I need to meet the budget, raise the structures. On the other hand, the politician needs people to speak to. On any given Sunday, where I am, I have an audience of 500 I did not pay to come. 500 every given Sunday. Sometimes goes to 700, sometimes. And when they know there's a prominent person coming, the numbers may shoot to 1,000. For a politician, he would have to pay and cough about 300, 400,000 to mobilize that kind of audience. I don't. So it's a meeting of needs. I need the money. You need to hear the people, your people. Say what you have to say. Give me the money. So because eventually I'm measured by the money I raise, I don't have a problem giving in so that the politician speaks. The politician will even get late. We started the service at 9. I'm preaching at 11:30. The politician arrives at 11:45. Then I stop for a moment.
Which also makes us ask now, at this particular point, who is controlling who? Because if you can begin a service late because a politician who is due to come has not arrived, and this is a mass, this is a worship service, it has a contract. You know, we begin at 9 and we end at 12, which is a public contract. But now we have to keep waiting and waiting. The priest is already here, but we have to wait, you know, for the politician to arrive for us to start. Who is controlling who?
It's a lot of factors at play. First, I think at some point the politician is controlling the priest. Because the priest is held at ransom. They cannot start the service. Even the proceedings within the worship service are somehow dictated by the politician. What time he arrives.
We sing worship choruses.
We sing. So at some point he's dictating. It's written. There's the English saying, "He who pays the piper calls the tune." I'm bringing the money, so you do what I say when I say it, and how I say it. But of course, also, you would anticipate or expect the congregation to protest. They too will not. Because the current generation will dwell on that which is sensational. And we will even celebrate the politician when he comes, stands
3 hours later.
3 hours later, and hurls a few insults. And we are celebrating and we're in church. And one of the things that makes me wonder, politician X comes at 11:30, hurls his insult in church. Another politician comes at 12, hurls insults in the same church, and we're celebrating. And we say we are worshiping God.
You know, you raise an important point there about, because we're talking about two parties here, talking about the politician, talking about the priest, but you brought the dimension of the congregation and their space to protest. You know, and it means then that their level of knowledge or their level of faith, of understanding of church, does not allow them to be upset, you know, by the presence of a politician, but they really are eager, actually, to have this presence. I mean, what's going on there?
Because you see, church, as I hinted earlier on, is really not about. It's no longer a spiritual home. It's not where we come to draw to God. To a large extent, of course, there are those righteous remnants, and we must pray to God that He strengthens their hands. But by and large, many people are coming to church for the experience, that excitement. That's why even in the pulpit these days, a comedian is celebrated. You're preaching, but really saying nothing, but you are making a lot of funny jokes and people are happy. Because we no longer come to church to seek God, to hear His word. We just want to come and experience God, feel nice about it, and also wear it as a badge of honor. I came to church, by the way. You go to your place of work on Monday, and someone challenges you in a certain way, and you tell them, by the way, me ni wa church. Hizo mambo sipendi. So coming to church no longer is about drawing to God, but it's about some status. Is a social status badge. So the fact that it has now become social status, a center of commerce, and is no longer about drawing close to God. Do we care whether whatever the politician says? Actually, as a congregation, after the service, we go to argue who delivered heavier punches.
You know, I think you said that I got dark at the beginning of this conversation, but I think it's going to get darker now because tell me, between the politician and the priest, in that kind of worship situation, doesn't the priest stand to lose more?
Indeed. I am forever grateful to one of my seniors in the church. He's called Reverend Dr. Gavairo. I once served with him in the leadership. And one time we received a senior delegation of the state into a worship service. And we had begun back and forth with them on a Wednesday. So the protocol team came to church. They said, we need to change this, we need to change that, we need to do this. And I was younger. And because he's older than me, he just sat listening. And I back and forth with the protocol team. Sunday came and they required us to change the seating arrangement in church. He was still very quiet. Then came the worship service. The political delegation came in. And just before he went to receive them, he told me, when I come in, you're the leader of service, fair enough, but when I come in, please hand over the service to me. He was the moderator, which I exactly did. And when he stood, they had given us a list of how they will speak. And from my estimation, it was going to take at least 3 hours. So he tells me, I hand over the leadership of the service to him, and he stands and says, we receive you all, and he observed the protocols, we receive you all, but this is what I have to remind you, this is a worship service. And once you get into a worship service, all political protocols end at the door. So this is God's house, and we are all God's children. So, having said
we should
that,
find that clip somewhere. That's an important bite.
Unfortunately, those days, streaming was not popular. But he said, once we all get into a worship service, all political protocols, we are children of God.
You know what that reminds me of? Going back to the Bible, reminds me of the dedication of the temple of Solomon. When the presence of God came down, priests, king, were falling prostrate.
Everyone.
There was everyone was on the ground. And I think that's
the same concept.
Yes.
At the feet of the cross, the ground is level for everyone. We all begin at the same point. So he said, no political protocols. However, I wish to acknowledge all of you who came, and he led the whole race. And then the senior-most politician told him, please come, deliver the greetings on behalf of everyone.
Because it's good to respect their leaders, but again, this is a space. Let me ask you a question, and this is maybe abstract. Do you think that when the politician comes to a space, like a worship space, do you think they exactly hope for the honor for the respect, for the time, for the jubilation they get, or are they surprised they get it?
Some expect it, but some don't. And I wish to refer to two politicians I recently listened to. One was Anne Waiguru, the governor of Kirinyaga. She went to a church, and then suddenly she was invited to speak. I think it was her. And then just recently was Sudi, the former MP, Sudi. And both of them were saying the same thing. They were saying, sometimes we are frustrated by church leadership. We just came to worship. But when you guys saw us, you invite us to greet the congregation. But we just wanted to come and worship. I mean, it's like we are intimidated by their presence.
Let's loop this back to commerce. Let's loop it back to commerce, because that's what you began with. Do you think that when the politician comes to church, is there a financial mind that
Yes.
that rises on the
Yes.
leadership, that the governor is worshiping with us,
in any case-
or a CS is worshiping
in
with
any
us,
case-
or the president is worshiping with us? So you think figures.
In any case, when we are organizing a fundraising, who are the first guest of honors we target? The politicians. So I think we have put it in our mind that politicians bring the greatest financial muscle to church. Yes, sometimes it's not correct. There are members who are quiet in church and they give more quietly. They do not expect. But you see, one of the question you asked, do some of them intentionally want to be recognized? Some no, but some yes, because this is a ready congregation. This is where they get a ready congregation they haven't paid for.
And the press footage as well.
And the press footage as well.
Yeah.
Look at all what is in the media. It's not the preaching, it's what they say.
And sometimes the way it's presented is as if the politician was a preacher.
And actually, as I was preparing, this thought came into mind. You see, they will always make the groundbreaking statements in church. They will even give the heaviest punches to the opponents in church. Some way, even after they abuse people, the abuses don't come as evil because they were in church. Somehow the setting of the church is able to sanitize what they said. So if someone called someone XYZ, but they were in church, it doesn't feel as bad. By the way, huyu mtu alikuwa kwa Mungu. Looks like God approved
Of that.
of that.
No, let me stay with that, because I want to ask again where the politician draws the courage to actually throw hurl abuses or insults or speak lowly of another politician and choose a church platform. Does it maybe have an indication that they have bought the place? We've come to several fundraisings. We've come with money, and so now we've bought this space, and therefore we can speak what we want instead of praising God. Because that should be, now we have bought this space. You can't stop us now.
You see, the story of Naboth and Ahab comes into mind. Ahab goes to Naboth and tells him, I want your vineyard, and can I buy it? Naboth says no. The king tells him, can I exchange it? I have land where I plant vegetables. Can I exchange so that you take my land for vegetables? So there's buying, there's exchanging, and finally there is being kicked out. Naboth eventually was kicked out by them. The current church has not behaved like Naboth. The politician came to us, asked for the vineyard, and even without resistance, we exchanged. Or we agreed to share, which is very sad. It is very sad.
Now, because at the point,
but you see, part of it is because of the current movement in the church. There's a movement, besides commerce, besides all other things I've said, another thing we need to consider that is influencing this thing is something called New Age revival, New Age reformation. Some call it New Apostolic revival, something like that. And they are propagating something called seven mountains. that every Christian has to make sure they take dominion of 7 mountains. Politics, that's government politics, education, arts, business, did I say education? But there are 7. So the move by that movement is we need to dominate. Christians need to. That's where the marketplace theology has come in, and all these things. So in the quest to seek domination in the government, they have given space to the very governments, not knowing that the government actually, or the politics actually swallowed them, as opposed to them now influencing.
That's an interesting. I think that what you've mentioned there, because we've had it a lot of times. The mountains, understanding,
it proceeds.
And the idea of domination, and that is a. And you'll be back, Reverend Dr. Thyro, because that's an entire dimension that it's quite eye-opening, and we need an understanding about that. But it refreshes us in terms of politics that we want to dominate there, and therefore what we get into sort of dominating, we dominate in the name of partnership. But at the end of the day, we realized it was not a partnership; it was actually we were swallowed.
We actually took up the agenda of the politicians and presented it in God's name.
Wow. Okay. Now, let me, because I'm still wondering about the priest. Does the contemporary priest, young or old, do they understand who they are? What I can call, or what we can call maybe, we can call it identity literacy. Do you know who you are? You know, as a prophet, do you know who you are, or is there some illiteracy?
I think we are in an identity crisis, and this one is historical. They say history always repeats itself, and those who don't learn from history are bound to repeat the same mistake. What we are seeing now is what has happened 1,000 years ago in the history of the church, because then it was one. 1,000 years ago, we only had the Catholic, Roman Catholic. We had a pope called Gregory. The very things we are struggling with now are the same ones he instructed the priests then. And he was telling them, you people have become too involved in the civil affairs. Too much to the extent people no longer honor you as spiritual leaders. See, the church, the government is in charge. To just a little theology. The church, the government is in charge. All politicians are in charge of the temporal matters of a human being. Things of here on earth, what you eat, what you put in your head, the education, where you sleep. But the church is in charge of both the temporal and the spiritual. That is the same things the government is in charge of, but even after you die, where do you go? The church reveals and teaches you these things. So he was challenging the priest then. You're too involved in the temporal things of this world, forgetting the spiritual. You don't remind people. So actually he gave an instruction. Henceforth, let the government of the day deal with the temporal matters, while you concentrate on the spiritual matters. So the crisis we have right now was there then. That's A. B, every 500 years, the church hits a rock bottom. But on the 501st year, the church rises. If you look at from Christ's time, 400 is around the time St. Augustine came in and the church started rising. 1,000 years is when around Pope Gregory the Great came and the church started rising. Another 500 years is when Martin Luther, John Calvin, John Wesley came up, and the 95 Theses condemning the corruption in the church. And they had forgotten the agenda of the church. Now, 519 plus 500 is 219. So we are at the rock bottom, but also history, because history never fails. We're also at a time of some form of resurrection.
Okay.
So this identity crisis shouldn't worry us too much. We are in one where the priest no longer perceives himself as the leader of the liturgy. Rather, he has become the MC.
Whoa. Wow.
Otherwise, how do you explain when a leader of service has to keep telling people, pigeni makofi na mtabarikiwa? Or you're in the middle of liturgy and it looks like an afterthought. Choir, please give us a song before we settle something here.
Ooh.
Time.
Mm.
Yeah? Or someone is speaking in the middle and preaching in the middle and you're asking people to clap. The names. Is there any difference between the MC and the leader? I mean,
Ooh. I mean, it's interesting where you have in a way incorporated MCism.
Yes.
Yeah, in your leadership.
And you want to excite the crowd so that when you see them quiet and tranquil and peaceful, you're thinking, these people
Needs to be stirred.
need to be stirred. I'm looking for, I really get worried when I see that. Feels like it's a DJ telling people, pull up.
Woo. No. I hope I get brighter at the end of this conversation, but let me, yeah.
But you see, indeed, the priest is at an identity crisis. Especially, again, if you add the movement, the woke movement, where you shouldn't say, give a clear-cut guideline. You're telling us, you are the leader of service there, and you're telling us X is sin or Y is sin. Who gave you authority to say these things? So generally the priest is in a crisis. Now, the priest is already in a crisis. Add the politician coming.
It's an opportunist. So at the end of the day, it's like the priest loses more.
Yeah, the priest
and the
loses
politician gains more.
Yeah.
Now, let's stay with that because there's a word you use at some point, and the word was protest, and I think you used it in context of the congregation.
Yeah.
But let's use it now in terms of resisting this, in terms of the priest who is watching this program, and next Sunday will deal with some politicians and needs to start pushing back, needs to stand taking their ground, needs to begin to to show the literacy of who the prophet is.
Yeah.
Now, if you can help us by saying how do we protest these, how do we push back this takeover by the political space, this being impressed by power, and begin to take our space, not disrespectfully, not dismissively, but this is a prophetic space, and this is how we do it here. How do we begin to do that?
Two things, and I start with where you ended, prophetic. We need to rediscover the prophetic aspect of our ministry. And sometimes this word has been misused in terms of what is prophetic. This is how I would want to define it. When we say prophetic, that leadership has to be prophetic. We cannot understand the prophetic without understanding the prophet first. And the prophet is a messenger appointed by God to deliver God's message. It's not his message, it's not his thing. So, and if God has appointed the prophet to deliver his message, it means also God has prepared the audience. And even though, like for example, the case of Jeremiah, even though the audience be not ready to listen, you still have to proclaim. So the rediscovery of our place has to begin with understanding that our role is prophetic, delivering God's message. That's and it's not our message, it's God's. So we are not seeking any human approval here, whether you agree to it or not. And that demands that the prophet also be sent by God himself, not be fake. To do whatever he's doing within the service or the church, the authority is not from him. It's from God himself. Institution for that matter. If the authority, he perceives the authority is from God, then even within the church service, he will exactly do that. That's number one. Number two, I can't remember when that research was released, but I read it somewhere. There is an American institute called Pew Research Institute. So they did a research over why people are running away from church. And something interesting was discovered, that people are running away from the corporate church, the institutional church, but going to something they called private religion. They are not losing faith, But rather than go to church to cultivate their faith, they are cultivating it alone in their privacy. And one of the things that came out of that research is people no longer come to the institution of church for nourishment because the things done in church no longer have meaning. You're telling me to, like, think about COVID. We had always told people before COVID, come to church and you'll be blessed. COVID came, they didn't come to church. Were they still blessed? You see, people are coming looking for meaning in church, and the things we do in church no longer are meaningful. So rather than become rude, they withdraw. So what should we as priests do? Is now do things deliberately that communicate meaning, so that even allowing that politician, like for example, what that senior minister did for me was very meaningful. Actually, I can't remember what he preached. I can't remember. But that very act
Of authority.
And reminding
direction.
Yeah. Today. And this was around 2015.
An awareness of the space.
Yeah, an awareness of the space. And everyone who, after the service, we all said, by the way, that was a lot of wisdom. So the way he had communicated the meaning of where we are, that's what people are looking at for. But people come to church and we have made no effort to deliberately communicate meaning. I mean, hymn number 1, Simameni. And for example, like in our church, I can predict the songs that will be sung over the next few Sundays. To God be the glory. Hymn number 1. Hymn number 2, Blessed Assurance. I mean, the things we are doing in church no longer communicate meaning. So, a priest who is looking forward to lead service on Sunday, let him, even before arriving at the service, already deliberately plan what will be done, what will not be done, so that when the politician comes, if we are to make space for him, it is because he will communicate something.
Okay. That's profound, because it means that from the beginning of the service, people should know why we're here.
Yeah,
and proceed in a way that supports that meaning.
That supports.
And whoever comes, irrespective of their position in authority, they should also support that meaning, not disrupt it.
Not disrupt.
Now, because of time, I want us to just shortly help the priest who is anxious or afraid, because there will be a pushback from the politician. When you tell the politicians, all of you, one speaks on behalf of everyone else, all the other 15, 20 feel demeaned and talk and speak lowly or speak badly about that particular support.
Two texts come into mind. One is the interaction between Abraham and King Melchizedek. Abraham has gone, rescued Lot, his nephew, and he's coming back. And the King Melchizedek, who was also a priest unto God, comes to meet Abraham. And he tells him, by the way, Abraham, you're blessed. And he's a king. Abraham was no king, just a mad father. And he had accumulated a little wealth. It is not Abraham who prompted the king to say you're blessed. It was simply by his action. So until that day we know who truly we are, we will go seeking validation. Abraham didn't go looking for the king. It is the king who came looking for him. So people who are going to lead service on Sunday, first know your primary responsibility on Sunday is to draw people to God. And you're looking, our task is, our music is for the audience of one who is God. That's the first one. 2 is the lady called Mary Magdalene, anointing the feet of Christ. She's anointing the feet of Christ here, and the men around Christ are complaining because her audience was one. Not the people around, but God. So if the priest or the leader of service is met with politicians, they have to make effort and remember our audience is one. We have a responsibility to draw everyone, including the priests, to the audience of one. In that, let's assume the priests, the politician didn't come. There are thieves in that congregation. There are righteous men and women in that congregation. There are con men in that. On an ordinary service, you have to draw all that mixture to God. Why should it be different when a politician comes? The agenda remains the same.
Okay.
Drawing everyone to God.
Now, yeah.
God.
Okay, because I'm about to close.
But
Yeah.
I think finally, we have to remember the call as priests, especially as we are a priesthood of believers, but we have set aside some as priests to lead us. We have to remember our call is to draw people to God, not to raise infrastructure, not to. That's secondary. It shouldn't be done, but so to demarcate the line between the politicians and the priest, it's not the politician to do it, it's us.
That's a very good way of
It's us.
ending this conversation.
Yeah.
And you point the duty to the priest.
It's us.
That it's up to the priest to say, this is a church space.
Yeah.
This is a worship space.
Yeah.
And this is how we do.
This is how we do it.
This is how we deal. These are our boundaries. Yeah. And should there be a need for protest, even live protest, then the priest should know this is their space.
Yes.
And they should maintain the honor of this space.
We have to be like Naboth. We have to protect the vineyard.
All right. Great. Protect the vineyard.
Protecting the vineyard, the responsibility is not on the king. It is on Naboth.
Okay.
The vineyard is ours.
Great. Thank you very much. Sounds like, just a short time, but packed with a lot of wisdom and insight. So thank you so much.
It's finished
already? I think we should have a part two of this. We should have a part two of this. Again, thank you so much for your insights. Very firm, directions. And I feel that the persons who are watching, especially Christians themselves, they have a voice now to talk in their meetings, and have expectations. And no, we don't have to listen to. We're not captive to the politician, and we shouldn't be. And the leaders now can also have conversations around how do we now make the worship space a worship space. And also the politician who is listening also now has some level of going to the worship space with that spirit of, I don't expect to be called out, I expect to worship. And a lot has come out, a lot more will come out when you do the second part of this, where do you draw the line? Viewer, thank you very much for being on Spotlight this day, and lots of wonderful insights. But one thing that stands out that has come from our guest, that is Reverend Dr. Kamau Thairo, is that when we gather in a space of worship, we don't gather to be pointed to power, political power. We gather to be pointed to God. We don't gather to applaud a political leader. We gather to praise and worship God. That must be so. This has been Spotlight. Thank you for watching.
Thank you for choosing Hope TV, the channel that brings you hope, entertainment,